So today I'm talking with Jeremy Lopatin, a professional EOS implementer, a fellow Ann Arbor native, and founder of two businesses. Jeremy's philosophy is run a better business and live a better life. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Great. Well, I'd like to start with just kind of what drove you to start your own business.
So, the short version is that 3 weeks after I got married, my wife woke up one day and said, I don't think I want to finish the master's program that I'm currently in. I just want to start a business. And so we did that. Um, Originally the first idea was kind of in the hospitality space. It evolved from there and it ended up being a different kind of business. But
So you went into business together.
we did. Our first company was an online retail business, and we sold organic loose leaf tea online. That company is still in existence, and my wife still runs it 23 years later. It's called Arbor Teas, and yeah,
Oh,
that was our first baby. That once we sort of cracked the code, on the company and had achieved a certain size or scale, and it became, consistently profitable, and we figure out how to make it work, kind of get bored. Then the
yeah.
puzzle's been solved, and it's time, and I get anxious to kind of move on and figure out the next thing.
So is that kind of what led you into the ESO?
Yeah, EOS. Yeah, and
I'm sorry.
so indirectly. So growing our online retail business required that one of us become really proficient in digital marketing. And so that ended up being me. And I found that I had a real knack and passion for doing that work. And, long story short, that ultimately led me to the digital marketing agency space. And I found myself on the leadership team of a marketing agency that was struggling, needed help. And it was through that organization as a leadership team, we decided that we needed something to help us tighten up the ship and get more traction in the business, more stability and consistency, and get back to growing and just an all around healthier team. We brought in a professional implementer, which is now what I do. And we decided to adopt EOS, which stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. We decided to bring that on as our operating system for the agency. And it was transformative. I really already had maybe 8 or 9 years of entrepreneurial experience at that point. And I remember going on that journey, implementing the tools and practices in the business and just thinking to myself, where has this been?
Mhm.
Since my first go round as an entrepreneur. And it was a real
I find it interesting because it kind of seems like it transcends any kind of an industry. And before I met you over at the Builders and Remodeling Expo,
mm-hmm,
I was listening to another podcast, Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered, and there was an interview going on with a broker on the East Coast.
yeah,
And she talked about this book, and I never heard of it before.
mm,
And she said, same as you, it was life altering for her. It made her
yeah,
sit down and figure out who was in the wrong seats. And she said, I didn't even know people were in the wrong seats. And you can talk
right.
about that later on.
Yeah, of
But
course.
that's when I met you. I was like, oh my gosh, this was so fortuitous.
Yeah,
So
that's incredible.
from there, did you decide you were going to change your trajectory and start doing the training and start a
Yeah.
business that way?
So I actually first broke off. I was still really passionate about digital marketing. So a couple years after we adopted EOS in that agency that I first was introduced to it through, I broke off and I started my own agency and I ran it on EOS from day one.
Okay.
And, it was pretty remarkable. The company grew really steadily, steadily year after year after year. Um, because we had so much clarity from day one, right? And that's what EOS delivers. Ultimately, it's clarity. And unlike a lot of our competitors in our space, right, we grew and it kind of averaged out to about 40% a year, 40% growth in revenue. And we all worked about 40 hours a week. And
Amazing.
in the marketing agency space, that's totally unheard of, right? Most agencies are riddled with chaos and it's very up and down, feast or famine. And we weren't completely immune to that, but much less so. Every time we hired a new employee, they would just be a little bewildered, right? In what they experienced as an employee and how different it was from other agencies they had worked on. I joked, that we brought in sort of refugees from other agencies. And in all of those conversations I had with employees over the years, just began to appreciate deeply that the kindest thing that we can do as leaders is to provide clarity for our people, right? And I have not yet come across anything that generates more clarity for everybody involved in a business than
So I just
then
started
yeah,
reading your book and I have got very far, but it seems like there's like six key components to the
yeah,
process.
yeah,
Do you
yeah.
want to
Well,
speak about
so
that?
yeah, so the model. I mean, it's not. So the book that you're referring to, just for the reader's sake, is this book called Traction, right? Written by Gino Wickman, who's the founder of EOS, right? He's the first among us. I mean, he created this whole thing, and he was the very first EOS implementer. But and now there's almost 900 of us around the with companies
Wow.
implementing the system in 70 different countries. It's pretty astonishing. But yeah, so the EOS model is broken into these six key components, right? And it stems from a discovery that Gino had that, man, like all these entrepreneurial leaders out there are wrestling with like 136 different things at any given time, right? But further, he recognized, working with a whole bunch of different entrepreneurs, that to the extent that we just focus on strengthening these six key areas of the organization, those 136 different things just have a tendency of settling in place, right? Because they're just symptoms of a weakness in one of those six areas, right? And so those areas are, right? The first is the vision component, right? The vision component's all about helping everybody on the team get on the same page with where the company's going and how it's going to get. The people component, it's all about getting right people, right seats, because we've got to have both, right? If we're going to achieve a
Hmm.
great vision. But the thing is, every organization has their own unique definition of what great means in their
Right.
company, right? And so we help them understand like what makes for a great person in this business. The third key component is the data component. The data component is just running the business on good, solid, objective information, right? Instead of ego and opinion and emotion, which is more commonly what entrepreneurial businesses are. And then what we find is when the vision, I'm gesturing like this because we usually lay the model out in a circle, right? But when the vision and people and data components of organization are strong, the organization just kind of becomes transparent and you're able to perceive all of the little impurities and imperfections and challenges and obstacles and all of that stuff just kind of jumps out at you, which brings us to the fourth key component, which we call issues. It's just companies now are going to be able to achieve significant success and sustain it for the long term until the whole team gets really good and identifying their issues, as they arise, and then prioritizing them wisely and solving the right ones at the right time so that
Hmm.
they go away for the long term greater good of the company. The fifth key component we call the process component. The process component is just getting all the most important things in the business done the right and best way every single time. So you can have consistency and scalability and profitability and all those good things, peace of mind, that come with just a well-run and systemized business. And then the last component we just call traction. The traction component is where we bring the vision down to the ground and we just execute with discipline and accountability, right? Day in and day out. So we're just always kind of rushing towards the long-term vision of
Pretty covers everything. And my first thought listening to it is, the person who is
it.
starting the company, they have the vision, but
Yeah.
sitting down and creating, be able to share that with people and then bringing
Hmm.
in the people that aren't going to bring their egos in, that are just sharing that vision with you. And,
Right.
and that's many different levels though, because you still have your very creative people, but you also have your people that are going to be your data people. So it's
Oh yeah.
finding all of them. Yeah.
It takes all kinds. We need all these different types of people with different, dispositions. They all have a role to play. They just all have to be in alignment, right? They have to be on the same page with the vision. And a lot of entrepreneurs, truthfully, they have a picture in their mind of where they want to take their company. right? They just live that, and they live, unfortunately, in that future state a lot of the time, right? But they have a difficult time communicating in a concise fashion to the rest of their team what that future vision looks like,
Mhm.
and that's where a lot of the difficulty lies. And so this isn't the sort of thing where the founder, we call them the visionary, right? The founder just kind of writes all this stuff down and foists it on their team. It's actually a practice. This whole journey is taken by the entire leadership team so that they're building the vision, they're crystallizing what that vision is together so that we really get buy-in. And it is shared at the leadership team level 100%. We're all on the same page, and then we take it as leaders into the.
It's huge. Can you share one or two client transformational stories that you might have? Is there anything
Yeah,
that
well,
sticks out in your mind as one
yeah,
of your favorite?
gosh. I mean, the reality of so many entrepreneurs is that they have a hard time letting go, right? Like in order to truly delegate and take things off your plate, like you have to have a lot of clarity about a number of different things, like what your particular strengths are, your unique ability, and
Mhm.
what's the best ways that you as the leader can serve the business, and also like where your weaknesses are, and what are the things that you've been holding on to that you're really kind of doing a disservice to the business by continuing to do. And you also have to have people in the business that you understand, like you can be confident they get it, they want it, and they have the capacity to do the things you're trying to. And so you need a way to understand and get to the bottom of that to be able to hand it off. And that's a theme that comes up over and over and over in every client. It's like the founders and other senior leaders that just aren't super good at delegation. And I have one client who, the founder is loves to golf. And he's a big cyclist, right? So the summertime, he just doesn't want to be in the office. He'll work his butt off the whole rest of the year, right? But he really wants to carve as much time out. And it was as his company grew, like that became a bigger and bigger challenge. Of course, he had a family and all this, and implementing EOS with him and his leaders, we got to a place where his business is self-running enough where he can take the summers off practically and basically go on sabbatical for 2 or 3 months every year so that he can
Was it
just focus on his.
was it difficult for him to reach the point where he was comfortable that the people he hired could do the job and that he didn't have to do everything and that he could walk away for a bit?
You know, uh, sure, in some ways. I will say he was maybe one of my more coachable clients, right? Um, and and he had really great people, but there are other teams that I've, worked with where we worked together to understand like what that team needed to look like, and then put in the work to actually put the people in place that would allow that kind of transformation to take place. Another instance is, talking about founders who have a hard time like letting go. Another one of my clients, he is brilliant, genius, and really it would make his greatest contributions if he could just sit in that sort of visionary research and development, space and leave the day to day to his team. That without a system and without clarity of accountabilities and clarity of process and things like that, he ended up being, is so often the case, sort of the final checkpoint for every decision, and every
Mhm.
process like had to pass across his desk and all of that. That's not very scalable. And if you
Right.
do try to scale a business where that's the case, it's going to get more and more stressful for that owner, that leader, visionary figure, and maybe others in the business as well. And so we've gotten that company to a place where, in the vast majority of cases, he doesn't need to be involved, right? And
Mhm.
so he can just stay in that visionary, like deeply thoughtful research and experimentation space, kind of like in his laboratory, cooking up the next thing,
Mhm.
where and his team is doing the day-to-day business of the current iteration of the business. So
Right.
he's getting make his biggest contribution to the business and live his best life. And the rest of the team isn't frustrated that everything is gummed up because we haven't heard from this person or that person. We've got the spot on
Right.
it.
And when it undermines, I think, an employee's creativity to know that you're not being entrusted with the final vision because
Yeah,
you've given me this to do. And now I know that at the end, if you question
yeah.
it, I have to go back and start over again.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah.
It's really demoralizing. Yeah, you're
Mhm.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Have you had anybody that you've worked with where you just had to fire them because you weren't making progress? I can only imagine that there's some people who think they want help, but
Right.
maybe not so
Well,
much.
I mean, truthfully, we strive to work with a certain profile of client, right? So besides like the demographic aspects, like the size, we usually start with companies that have 10 to 250 employees. And they are entrepreneurial in nature. That doesn't mean they're necessarily for profit. We can work with nonprofits. They have to have this entrepreneurial spark, but we look for leaders in businesses that are growth minded, willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable, and
Hmm.
are frankly more afraid of the status quo than they are of change. There has to be a certain degree of kind of humility and self awareness that, man, we've tried all these things and we just haven't been able to break through the ceiling. There's this thing holding us back, and so we're looking for folks that are coachable because, that's not to say that EOS can't help folks who are a little bit more reluctant to embrace change, but the journey is going to take longer, you know. And I have worked with businesses who, we've had to, our policy generally is that we don't fire clients. We just try to hold them accountable for what we believe deeply is the system of tools and practices they need to be bringing to bear in their business. And if they're not, and if they're stuck and they're having difficulty doing that, we just keep bringing them back to the basics and exploring with them, like where the barrier might be or whatnot. And sometimes we have to give a little tough love, and I have not had the situation personally where a client has thrown up their hands and said, screw it, like this isn't for
Okay.
us. But there have been, clients who, for different reasons have needed to, hit pause on their journey. It's pretty powerful. Like the process that we take clients through with their leadership teams is, it's really, really impactful. And so, we get them through that first session and they just like they have that light bulb moment and they start to appreciate, oh my gosh, this is a fundamentally different way to run the business, and I want to know the rest.
Can you kind of walk through what you go through and then the time frame? How long are you working
Mm,
with the company? So are
yeah.
you doing like one day with leadership and then giving them something to do and then going back and kind of going over that?
Yeah, that's right on. So we have a proven process that we follow after working with literally tens of thousands of leadership teams. There was lots of dials being turned and levers being adjusted to figure out like the exact right sequence of how these different tools need to be introduced, what to focus on when and whatnot. And now we have this like, really well process that we walk our clients' leadership teams through to implement EOS in the business. And so, um, to back up, like when we're working with leadership teams, our goal is to strengthen each of those six key components that I was talking about, right? And so we're on a journey to do that. And we have a whole array of tools that we want to make sure the leadership team and truthfully, everybody in the business masters. And so we introduce in our process the five foundational tools in day one, which is a full day facilitated session that we do with the leadership team. And that's honestly, those five tools are like 80% of the ball game, right?
Mhm.
And we fill their heads with a ton of information, right? It's just like a lot of teaching, right? I'm wearing three different hats with my clients. I'm teacher, facilitator, and coach, and those I switch roles at different points in the journey and, at times. But And then 30 days later, they come back for another full day session where we revisit what we did on the first day and we kind of address bugs and kinks and tune it up a little bit. And then we start building the vision we do that for the balance of that day. And then 30 days later, again, we bring them back and we finish fleshing out the vision and plan for the organization. And that we do that space learning for a reason because we want to give these leaders an opportunity to go back into their business and practice
Mhm.
and then come back with, and smoke out the issues, right, that they're experiencing and help them solve those or just get more and more comfortable using the tools because ultimately we need to get them 80% strong or stronger in each of those 6 areas of the business. And we need
Mhm.
them to have mastered all of the tools, at which point they are ready to what we call graduate, right? Um, and that whole journey usually takes about 2 years. It's going to
Okay.
vary from client to client. Some, again, are either a quicker study or they're a smaller or larger organization or have deeper ingrained dysfunctions, whatever it might be. And so it's going to be different for everybody. And there are clients who prefer to keep their EOS implementers around forever because after laying that foundation in those first 3 sessions that I described, we just move into what I call execution mode. Right. So we are running my clients' quarterly planning sessions and their 2 day planning sessions every year. And we're just we're learning new tools along the way. We're strengthening the existing tools and we're rolling the system out deeper and deeper into the organization. And it's really nice. And I can speak from my own experience as a business owner. It's really nice to have somebody else lead those sessions so you can have like open and honest dialogue where you as either the owner or the chief executive or whatever can just be a participant, right?
Mhm.
And you can trust in this skilled facilitator to make sure that all the voices on the team are heard equally, which is really difficult if you're trying to be the facilitator, you know? But that's not our goal. Our goal is not to embed ourselves in our client organizations. It's not to breed dependency, on us. Like I am there to help my clients operate independently. And, hopefully they get to a place where they've mastered the tools. And then if they want to keep me around, great. But, if not, that's awesome too, because that's really,
Been successful. Out
yeah,
of the 6 components, do you find 1 or 2 that most businesses find so surprising that they may not have had working correctly?
yeah. I mean, there are elements of all of them that are really common blind spots or gaps for
Mhm.
entrepreneurs. But I would say the work that we do in the people component, getting clarity about what makes for the right person in the right seat in a business, that is like probably the most light bulbs go on there because people have a hard time sorting out like, well, how can I codify? Like, what is it exactly that I need out of my team, generally speaking, or for each specific seat and whatever? And so we take them through a process first to define what their core values are. So we do a discovery process to define and document, like, what are the core values of the business? And then we show them how to use those core values essentially as a filter to draw great people by our definition, right,
Mhm.
towards our business and repel people who just don't fit our culture. And there, on the flip side, we take a really deep look at what is the exact right structure for this company. And once we've done that, you know, what are the right seats for the business? And once we've figured all that out, taking a structure first, people second approach, we start putting butts into seats and we make sure we're really explicit. Like, okay, this is what we said we needed in our business. Are we certain that the person we're putting in the seat gets it, wants it, and has the capacity to do it,
Mhm.
for each and every one? And working through that process of considering the core values and considering like these really specifically laid out accountabilities for every role in the company, we smoke out a whole bunch of issues. You realize right away that you kept people around either because you love them and they fit your culture, but they really aren't able to deliver to the
Mhm.
level that you need them to for the role they have. Or you realize that you have people who you almost feel like you can't live without, right? Like they're maybe your top salesperson, or they're like, a top performer. They put up great numbers. Maybe they are carrying a heavy load of clients, or they're just responsible for a lot of important stuff in the business. And you feel like you can't live without them, but they're also this huge source of friction because they don't fit your culture, right?
Right.
And so they're sort of keeping your culture hostage, right? They're chipping away at your business in ways that you can't even always like see and appreciate. And man, when, both of those scenarios you've got to address, but if it's that latter one, it takes a long time for some leaders to come to the realization or appreciation that they need to make a change. And when they finally do, and maybe they let go of that individual, the whole rest of the team turns to them and is sort of like, what took you so long?
And they start to flourish because they're not
Yeah, because
alienated from.
absolutely. Yeah, because culture, especially in this day and age, is it's the differentiator, right? Like
Yeah.
if there's top quality talent, people who like you really are really gonna do a great job in your business, they're not interested in working for a mediocre, especially like in the younger and younger tiers of employees. Like they have a different appreciation of work-life balance and quality of life and all these things, and it's the culture that's going to keep them leaning in, right? And it's going to
Yeah.
help feel connected and committed to the business.
Well, and I think with AI coming in, my daughter is turning 21 this year, and
Okay.
her generation is really surprisingly not embracing it as much as I thought kind of my
Mm,
generation is. And
mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, I think they're going to have difficulty with that. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the next generation is going to be able to keep the people in the people businesses.
Yeah.
And as I say that, I did hear that that is truly going to be what people are going to need. They need people who can relate to people and get that
Mm,
trust and that understanding.
absolutely.
So,
Yeah, and we've been having a lot of conversations within EOS worldwide and amongst my peers about, the role and impact of AI in businesses because, you if you are using AI to delegate uh, hard stuff that is usually where leadership, like you learn more in the hard experiences than you do in the easy ones. And so if you're taking the difficulty away of certain aspects, or you're sort of abdicating or delegating your leadership prerogative to AI and letting that make tough calls for you or whatever, you're actually not, as a leader, as a person, like going to have the sort of growth that you would have. And
mhm,
so I worry a lot that we are entering a chapter where we have a whole lot of folks, both in leadership positions and kind of frontline employees, who are actually limiting their individual growth. They might be highly productive, right? But they are not
mhm.
necessarily growing because they're not being forced as much to struggle and make and tough calls and whatever, or they're relying overly so on. So
Yeah,
it's going to be
which
really interesting.
really all the AI is everybody else's input. So
Yeah,
it's
but right,
it's when you break
yeah,
it down. Yeah.
hmm
Oh man, so much has changed so quickly that I think everybody's just trying to get caught up with it. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
got
2 years ago we would have been having a totally,
yeah. I have to remind myself and go back that we have had artificial intelligence around for a long, long time.
Hmm.
A computer and search engines. And,
Sure.
we're
Yeah.
just
And
looking
search
at it totally
engines. Yeah,
differently.
absolutely. And so my background was, digital marketing and specifically search marketing. And so, yeah, like machine learning and artificial intelligence has been actively in our lives for a long time, like better than 10 years probably, but people just didn't, it wasn't so clear. Like it was kind of
Right.
running in the background. Now it's like,
Right. It wasn't the machine that's going to be cleaning your house while you're out.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Is there anything we didn't cover that you want to talk about? It's pretty broad. I know. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, where you started, at the beginning, just when you mentioned sort of people running a better business so they can lead a better life, like that is, my deepest motivation in doing this work. And there are so many business owners out there who, they're just being run by their businesses instead of the other way around. And
Mhm.
they're buried under that load, both because they're surrounded by chaos and complexity, right? But that needs to be simplified and reined in. But they also just don't have clarity, and they don't have the right people, and they haven't learned how to delegate. And so they're so burdened by their businesses, right?
Yeah.
And I know from my own experiences that, like, once you start implementing this set of tools and practices, like, all of that can change. And it's not just the owner and it's not just the leadership team that benefits, right? Because going back to what I said, like, as leaders, creating clarity for our teams is like one of the best and kindest things that we can do. And so
Mhm.
you end up with a business where everybody's thriving. Everybody has the clarity to understand, where are we going? How do I fit in to this future vision? What do I do on a day-to-day basis to work towards that? Like, what comes next? And everything runs smoothly, and there's not so much friction and confusion and whatever. And so now you have, like, this whole company of people who enjoy their work life and are finding actual fulfillment and satisfaction in it,
Mhm.
and go home to their families in a better condition, right? And so,
Not
like,
kick the dog when they walk home.
yeah, exactly. Like, the knock-on effect is huge also. I can speak from my own
Yeah.
personal experience. And so that is what, like, really deeply moves me to do this work. And I just hope there are business owners out there that are just watching this now and are just sick of, like, living in that space, right?
Yeah.
And carrying that weight and having it push out, their ability to live their best
Well, and what I'm getting out of this, and I have to do to my own business, is going back to old school, just reaching out to people, get rid of the shiny objects that keep getting shoved in our way. Because real estate
life.
is,
Yeah.
we're prime target for every kind of digital marketing and anything
Oh my
else.
God.
So, but
Right. Right. Right.
nothing beats just calling somebody and saying, "Hi, I'm thinking about
Relationship.
you."
Yeah.
Yep. So I think you were right about the one thing: clarity brings calm.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to
Absolutely.
ask you a few last rapid questions. They're just
Yeah.
personals. Best business book you've read besides Traction? What would you tell anybody to share and read?
Are so many good ones out there, but one that was for all of those entrepreneurs and really sort of driven individuals that are super goal oriented, they're living in that future, right? Dan Sullivan, who's an excellent coach, he runs an organization called Strategic Coach, has written many great books, but he wrote one called The Gap and the Gain, and it encourages entrepreneurs and business leaders to not focus on, so many people are sort of, they're pointed at the future and that thing that they think they need to get to in order to be fulfilled, be successful, whatever. But that milestone, that goalpost out there is usually like society's creation, or it's what they make up other people believe is what success looks like. And he encourages folks to kind of measure their progress backwards, right? And just focus on how much growth you are truly achieving daily, weekly, monthly. And when you do that, it really becomes a source of incredible confidence. Like, it focuses on the gain and not the gap between where you are now and where you perceive you should be. And
Gotcha.
when I read that book, it really was transformative.
Put that in the show notes so we can share that
Yeah.
too. What's the one thing that thriving entrepreneurs have in common?
I mean, far and away, the understanding that they can't do it alone. They are not going to be the best at everything, and they have become comfortable with that.
So that probably would lead to this one, the biggest mistake you see business owners make.
Well, yeah, I mean, related, certainly not, failing to delegate is a big one, but I would say waiting too long to make hard or difficult, unpleasant people decisions, right? Just not pulling the trigger on making that tough call, right? Nobody likes to, but the handwriting's usually on the wall for months or years before
Before
a
they
lot
do.
of leaders make that choice. and it's to the detriment of the business.
Right. I could see that. And then
Mhm.
finally, what does living great mean to you?
Well, I mean, in EOS, we call it the EOS life, right? Doing what you love with people you love, making a huge impact, and getting compensated accordingly, and having time to enjoy other passions, right? Pursue other passions in your life.
I think as
That's
Americans, we forget about that.
yeah, right.
We
There
work
is
to live. We
more.
don't live to
Oh my
work.
God, totally. There's so much more to this life. When you're breathing your last breaths, like people aren't gonna celebrate, how hard you work per se,
Yeah.
or all those extra hours you spend at the office, but they are gonna look at the legacy you made left in terms of the relationships and your other contributions to society and stuff like that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, I thank you so much for joining me
Oh
today. It
yeah.
was really interesting. I look forward to finishing up the book Traction.
Yeah.
And if people want to get a hold of you, what is the best way to get in touch?
Yeah, I mean, people can email me at jeremy.eosworldwide.com. I think you could put that in the show notes or something. You can even give them my cell phone number if you want. But those are great ways to get a hold of me, and we can just grab some time to connect, learn about, what challenges you're facing, and see if something like EOS would help.
I'll make sure I have all that and contacts and links in the show notes and bio. I had
Oh,
one last
great.
thing on my notes that I don't
Mm.
know what it is. It says that you're
Oh,
involved in ENRG, Ann Arbor Peer
oh
Group
yeah.
for Visionaries and Integrators.
Yeah, so I started with my colleague Mike, a local chapter of a group called Energy or ENRG, which stands for the Entrepreneurial Networking and Resources Group. But it is an organization expressly established for the top leadership of EOS run businesses. And
Oh,
so you can
awesome.
think about it as like a peer group for the who we call the visionary and integrators of EOS run businesses. We meet every month on the second Wednesday of the month, and it's a wonderful opportunity for those leaders to stay sharp with how they're using and implementing the tools in their business, connect with a wider community, and meet other leaders, right?
Right.
Because walking around, you don't necessarily know what businesses run on EOS and which ones don't. But I promise you, there's a lot out there, right? I think we've estimated that worldwide there's over 300,000 businesses that are using EOS tools in their business.
Mhm.
And uh, 33 or 4,000 at this point have gone through that process that I take my clients through, to professionally implement, being able to be in a room and bring some of your thorniest issues in your business to get help from your peers and solving them. And those peers all share the same vocabulary and they all use the same tools. It's really powerful. It's really great.
I think that's just really powerful that you put that together. And it also,
Yeah.
like you said, keeps everybody fresh, keeps you in there. Everybody can keep building. That's awesome.
It's been,
Very
yeah,
good.
we've been running it since, I think September of last year, and we've got a great group of leaders and we're always looking for more. So if you already run on EOS, contact me and I'll get you registered for the chapter and you can start.
Great. Well, I have certainly enjoyed this, and I hope the audience does too. And
Yeah.
anybody listening, please follow our podcast, and we appreciate you stopping in.